Hey, Leilani Cawthon here. I'm at ASU+GSV, and on camera right now is Jeff Borden, who's from Western Governors University. He's going to talk about AI and the whole child. All right, Jeff, tell us what we need to know.
Well, when it comes to AI specifically, there's really a scaffolding issue that most AI platforms are struggling with. They are not reaching maturity with the learner. They instead will just spoon feed you the information so that you can remember something in the short term, but they're not growing with you over time to help you actually learn. And so I think it's an amazing tool. It can do amazing things, but until we start programming it to say, hey, grow with the person and give them some things that are harder as you move through the learning journey with them, until that happens, they're really not going to be a learning tool. They're just going to be a, hey, how do I get the information faster tool?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So what essentially you're saying is that an LLM could be broken into subunits of learning,
Yep.
and to learn at the point of the individual and accrue the knowledge of the individual in order to scaffold, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So forced retrieval is a great example. We know how powerful it is. It's a desirable difficulty, really good. It's been studied since the 70s. We struggle to do that. And so forced retrieval would say that I say to you, Leilani, you want to learn this thing? I need to remind you just before you forget. And if I remind you just before you forget, you'll remember it twice as long. If I can remind you just before you forget the second time, you'll remember it twice as long again. That's where the old adage of 7 times and you've got something for life comes from.
Yeah.
Well, I can't do that because I don't know you that well. In fact, you probably can't even do it for yourself.
Right.
AI can learn us. And so what I can say to the AI is, if I don't remember, then remind me in half the time next time. If I do remember, then take twice as long next time before you remind me. But also those reminders aren't going to be just spoon-fed reminders of, hey, here's A, B, C, D, which one is it? Because that's not really forced retrieval. That's almost like a television reminder. I need to have the AI say, you said this thing is important, what is it? And then just wait for me to respond. And that text conversation that I can have with the AI actually does me tremendous good. And then the AI knows if I really did remember it or if I just partially remember it.
Okay, so let's apply this in real life because, I think with K-12 more than I do the higher ed sector. In real life, a lot of teachers already talk to me about AI from the viewpoint of you have to have added practice because otherwise they forget, right? Like, so I think of like learning the addition and subtraction tables, right? And you got to be reminded over and over. And practice is really coming back into vogue now. A lot of the methodologies are losing ground that came into being like 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of teachers are talking about going back to that. So what you're saying is that an AI can follow you in order to cause that. But where are we at with like other more nebulous topics? Are we aiming at an objective of testing? What's the objective?
So it's interesting that just using the word testing in desirable difficulties language, there's something called the testing effect.
Okay.
We know that when a person is tested on something in a safe way to fail kind of environment,
right,
that they will remember it longer, they will apply it deeper, and they will contextualize it across.
Right.
So testing in the sense of, a sit down paper midterm kind of thing, that's not when I say testing, I'm talking about the AI coming in and saying, do you remember this? And so as that happens, the nebulous actually becomes much more tangible. People can put things together much more tangibly.
Okay. On a practical basis, though, most of K-12 and a little bit, I think, higher ed is aimed at some assessment metric. It's aimed at an outcome more than it is aimed at more nebulous retention, right? So from that perspective, it's probably easier to program the LLM because we're headed here, right? So then it just backwards engineers how that would be accomplished by a date, right? I'm not really grasping what you mean by assessment. We don't care about the testing as much as caring about the retention. So talk to me about that, because I can't imagine being able to program something where you don't have a defined objective, right?
Oh, I'm not saying you don't have a defined objective. So it's really about learning.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, what are the competencies? What are the masteries? What are the outcomes you're trying to get to?
Okay.
And then there are elements of that thing. So if you want to talk about math, when you talk about, understanding the framework for geometry or for an angle,
Yeah.
well, you've got to now understand the mechanics that go into that with regard to the specific equations that will matter with over, under.
Yeah, there's points of cognition.
So giving students the ability to have AI tutor them, help them
Yeah.
with reminders of those things at various points, rather than saying, do it at night when you do your homework. And unfortunately, many students will have forgotten what they did the night before
Right.
because it didn't set in, because it was just a short-term working memory kind of thing.
Right.
AI can help us get to a place where we're actually applying it through the testing effect.
Right.
So that's what we can really do to scaffold this information with the student, with the learner, so that they're learning it, not just short-term memorizing.
Okay, I got it. So I think one of the things that you would run into, and I think less in higher ed than you would in K-12, is the cognitive level of the different humans, right? Everyone's different. And what happens in K-12 is you try to give them a IEP, individual education plan, and these are all the things that they have to be accommodated for. But you still have the situation where it's like, well, this kid is just literally 3-4 grades behind the present grade. And so I have to scaffold him totally differently. It's basically, I have to teach him third grade, even though he's a seventh grader. Things become very difficult then in terms of trying to catch you up to an objective point. It's not really humanly possible to do, which is one of the big problems in K-12 right now. I don't see it as big as in higher ed. So then you end up with this issue, which is how do you make it so that time is not a factor, right? You're aiming at some objectives. You got all these things, all these check boxes you got to tick off, right? But you've got a squeezed time window for some, and for others, it's like they have more time. What do you think about AI adapting to the time window change?
Well, remember, WGU is a competency-based learning environment. So
Yeah, okay.
As we build toward competencies, when you reach a competency, you move on.
Okay.
And so you're not beholden to the rest of the class that hasn't gotten there yet, if need be.
Okay, I'm good.
And so trying to, first of all, help our students see the power in that, and then apply that once they become teachers of their own classes.
Yeah.
That's important to us. So we're really trying to take that sort of near and far transfer and include that in the curriculum, so that it's not just about the chemistry or the science or the math. We're trying to say, here's the pedagogy that goes along with it.
Oh,
here's
okay.
what you just experienced that you should consider when you start to teach your own students.
I got it. So what else do I need to know? What else do people need to understand? What's the name of the system? How are you making it available? What's happening?
Well, when we talk about whole learner, what we're really talking about is the good old-fashioned learning triangle that many people have seen for 120 years. We now know that there's a lot of cognitive science and neuroscience that sits behind that, so that it actually is correct. This is not like the learning styles thing of the 70s that has been disproven over and again.
Yeah, it's debunked.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
This has not. The learning triangle works. So that learning triangle at the top, at the apex, you've got cognition, and about a third of students struggle in cognitive ways at different times with different subjects.
Yeah.
So readiness, preparedness, things like that. Down in the lower left, you've got affectiveness, affection. Well, we know that about a third of people, humans, cannot overcome an affective disorder without intervention.
Okay.
So feeling lonely, feeling disconnected, feeling non-supported, whatever that may look like, those students can't overcome that. We now know why. They're not producing oxytocin in the brain. They're instead producing glutamate. And by producing glutamate, glutamate comes out of your system and eats neurons. It stops you from thinking. So there are people who, without support, without friendships, without networks, they can't learn. It's not something they can just desensitize themselves to. They can't until there's an intervention.
Yeah.
In the lower right corner of the learning triangle, then is conation. It's a word no one uses anymore, but it has largely been replaced lately with mindset. Some people like grit or tenacity or resilience, but it basically suggests that if a person doesn't believe they can, then for about a third of people without intervention, they can't. The practitioner's job is to help intervene and say, no, you got this. I can get you there.
Yeah.
So that's really where dopamine starts to come into
Yeah.
play
Yeah.
to say, you can do this. You can get
Yeah. Okay, so now we have AI,
huh?
social emotionally, aiding you to attain your finest level of cognition and attainment, right? Like achievement in this in any subject. How are you getting around the fact that a lot of people are right now afraid of social emotional relations with AI? I mean, there's been, I think, 2 K-12 live students who've committed suicide
Sure.
over a relationship with AI. How do you propose we get around that?
That's a powerful and important question. There are, first of all, the systems that I'm talking about with the use of AI is stuff that's being built today.
Okay.
No one has built anything that is trying to do all of this.
Okay.
So we're trying to put different things together. We've got parents on one hand saying, I expect my child to come out of whatever class K-12 system knowing AI so that they're competitive in the future, that most parents believe.
Yeah, and they're already using it. So, I mean, yeah.
Some, but to what degree and in what ways? Is it in a beneficial way, or is it just their own sort of, I unpacked something and figured it out myself?
Yeah, yeah.
And so we've got that on one side, whereas you've got psychologists on the other side saying, get the phones out of the classroom, get the devices out of the classroom, right? Be careful. Somewhere in the middle is probably where you're going to find some degree of reasonable, middle of the road
Yeah,
approach that says,
I agree.
here's how we architect some experiences so that these things can happen.
Yeah.
So that as we have perhaps the AI start to understand the learner, almost like their coach, like their tutor,
Yeah.
it's a tool that is not, it doesn't have to be on all the time. It's not a 24/7 best friend, but it absolutely could be something that an institution, a school, a classroom, a teacher can use to say, I'd like you to help guide, and I'd like you to also report back to me so that I can also help this child.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of programming it
Yeah.
at the highest age entry level, like, you know, don't engage in,
Right.
encouraging self-harm and blah, blah,
Sure.
blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's not hard to do. It's just that it was missing
Right.
in the commercially available,
Right.
open, free
Yeah.
LLMs, which is crazy to me,
Agreed.
but it was. So, yeah, so you're talking about walled garden LLMs
Yeah.
that you can do that easily. So people should not be afraid of it because it's easy to tell it, don't do that crap. Like, we're not having sexual relationships here with
Right.
an AI, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I understand. Okay, so what else do we need to know?
Well, I mean, as far as the whole human approach that we're taking, unfortunately, this is not something that really has permeated K through 20 education. So again, we still largely look at that cognitive aspect. That's what we measure, and that's what we intervene for. So not only do we need to promote this kind of education for our students, we also need to, in my case, look at the pre-service teachers, teach them that way, and then open up that black box and say, you just learned this way. This is worth repeating with your own students. So I've got sort of a twofer that I'm trying to accomplish here.
Yeah.
Not only to teach my university students who are going to become teachers that way, but I've got to help them see how important it is to do that in their classrooms.
Well, I think this is a good genesis that you're creating. You're saying the teaching workforce of the future, because of your work at WGU,
Right.
is going to be more human in an age of AI. And I think that's a beautiful thing, totally beautiful thing. Well, thank you then for this interview. I think this has been very cool.
Thanks for the time. It was nice to meet you, and good luck and good learning.